So today we're going to look at some loop projects in Microbit, and we'll look at how we can use loops to manipulate arrays to display the values in an array, and we'll also look at using loops to calculate totals. So in the first project we're going to create an array of numbers, and we're going to store the values 5, 7 and 9, and then we're going to loop through the array indices and print out the value at each index within that array. So a loop is something that would naturally tend to go with an array. So if you want to print out all the values in an array, you would use a loop to do it. If you want to sum all the values within an array, or if you want to do something to every single value in an array, a loop is a typical structure that you would use to do that. So let's try this project. So we're going to make a new project. I'm just going to get rid of the forever block. And then on start, I'm going to go to variables and make a variable, and I'm going to call it numbers list. So then I'm going to go to arrays here, and I'm going to set my numbers list to array, and I've got 5 as my first index, 7 as my second, and then finally we're going to put 9 as the third one. So now I've set up my array, which has three variable values, 5, 7 and 9, and we'll be able to access those using index 0, 1 and 2. So the next thing I want to do now is I want to go and put in a loop, and I'm going to go for index from 0 to 2, and I'm just going to hard code this for a minute, and then we'll talk about what other way we might be able to do that. So for index from 0 to 2, I'm going to show number. I'm going to pull that across, and the number I want to show is I want to go into arrays here, and I want to get the value at, so here list get value at 0. Now you see the way it's showing NaN here, that just means that it can't find the value of that list, because remember I used numbers list instead. So now if I say show numbers list get value at 0, it'll show 5 all the time. But I don't want to show 5 all the time. I actually want to go back and I want to show the value at the index. So first time around the index is 0, it will show a 5 as we're seeing here. Next time the index will be 1, it'll show a 7, and the last time it will show a 9. So if I just restart here again, you see it's shown 5, 7 and 9 because it went through indices 0, 1 and 2. I just want to show you something else here as well. If we go back into arrays, there's a length of array here, and I can use this to decide when I stop. So remember my indices, so I've got 3 things in the array, so the length of this numbers list array will be 3. So if I want to go from 0 to 2, I can actually use this length of array numbers list and get the math function -1, or minus here. So I can just put in length of array at the start and then take 1 off it. So that will allow me to go from 0 to 2 in this case. And if I just put that in instead of the 2, it will automatically calculate the length of the array each time. So that if I add extra values into the array, that's going to allow me to do that. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit here so that you can see the code a little bit better. So if I do this, so you can see there for index from 0 to length of array numbers list -1. So again, if I just restart it, you'll see it's showing 5, 7 and 9. So that's still working. The beauty of this though is if I now add in another value like 11 and another one, say 13, and then I just add in one more, and notice when I put in more than 5, it changes the way it displays it, but it still does the same thing with the array. So it's just showing us there now. I'm just going to restart it in a second and you'll be able to see it from the start. So if I restart, it's showing 5, 7, 9, then it's showing 11, now it's showing 13, and finally it shows 15. So I haven't had to change my code here at all to do that, because I've had the length of the array. Whereas if I had left in the 2 for the index, it would only have shown the first 3. So that's just something that you can do when you're using arrays. Just use some of the functions that are already there. So this is just showing you how you can use a for loop here to cycle through each of the values in an array and just print them out. Now again, if you wanted to calculate the totals, you could do that as well. And that's our next project, but we're not going to use an array for that. We're just going to use the index. So in this project, we're going to, when the A button is pressed, calculate the total of the numbers between 0 and 20, and when the B button is pressed, we'll calculate the total of the odd numbers between 5 and 17. So let's just have a look at how we might do that. So we'll just look at the A button first, and then we'll do the B button. So we'll code the A button and test it, and then we'll code the B button and test that. So I'm just going to go and create a new project. Now it's prompting me to give this project a name, so I'm just going to call it Loops Array. And then save that, and then I'm going to create a new project here. So remember this time, so I'm just going to get rid of the on start and get rid of the forever. So we're coding when the A button is pressed. So what I want to do is I want to have a loop, and I want to loop from 0 to 20. Okay, so that's going to loop from 0 to 20. Now remember, we want to calculate a total. So I'm going to create a variable called total. Click OK on that. And at the start, before I go into my loop, I'm going to set the total value to 0. Then I want to, when I'm in my loop, I then want to add the index value to the total, because the index is going from 0 to 20. So I want to add that index value to total. So if I go to variables here, I can set total to, and again go to maths and get the plus. So here I'm going to just put that in here, and I'm going to add, so I'm going to start off with total, put that in there, and then I'm going to go to variables. So I'm saying add the index to the total each time. So I'm setting the total to whatever the value is already in total, and to that I'm adding the index. So for example, first time round total is 0, the index is 0, so I add 0 and 0, and that gives me 0. Second time round the index is set to 1, so I add 1 to the total, so it's 1 plus 0, and that gives me a total of 1. The next time round the index will be 2, so I'll add the 2 to the 1, and that will give me a total of 3, and so on. And then the last thing I want to do now is I want to show the number outside of the loop. I just want to show the number total. So if I go to variables, I should be able to find my total here. And when I now press the A button here, it shows me that the total is 210. So you should just make sure, just verify that if you add the numbers 0 to 20, that it will give you a total of 210. And this is how we do that. So that's on the A button pressed. So we now need to code the B button. So I'm going to go back in here, and I'm just going to go down here a little. So I'm going to put in the B button pressed, and I am going to set the total back to 0 again. So this time I'm going to repeat a number of times. So remember, when the B button is pressed, we want to calculate the total of the odd numbers between 5 and 17, I think. So this time, instead of using the for loop, I'm actually going to use the repeat loop. So I'm just going to pull that across. So what I'm going to do, if I just move this up a little bit so you can see what I'm doing here. So I'm going to have another variable, and I'm just going to call it count. So I'm going to use this now as my index this time round. So I am setting the total to 0. I'm going to set the count to 5 because I want to start at 5. And we need to figure out how many times we're going to do it. Well, we're going to do it when the count is 5, and then 7, and then 9, and then 11, and then 13, and then 15, and then 17. So we're going to repeat it 7 times. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to set the total to the total plus count. So we're going to add on that count value to the total. So if I just put in the total there, and then I'm adding in the count. And then the next thing we're going to do is we are going to set the count value to count plus 2. So we're going to add 2 on each time. So if I go to variables here and put in count, and I'm just going to add 2. So then the first time around count is set 5, then I'm going to add 2 to it and it'll become 7, then I'm going to add 2 to it and it'll become 9, and so on. So if I now press my B button, actually I haven't shown the total, so I need to go back here. I need to show the number, and I need to go back to variables, and I need to show the number total. So now if I press the B button, it's showing 77. So 5 plus 7 plus 9 plus 11 plus 13 plus 15 plus 17 should give you 77. So that's just showing you the two different ways. So in one case we're using the for loop because we're incrementing by 1 each time, and then when we're using when we're incrementing by 2 each time, we're not using the for loop. That time we're just using a repeat. You could also use a while loop here, and you could use a while loop for all of these. It's just, I suppose, just showing you different ways in which you can use those various different loops. So that should help you to work through some other loops projects.